Group activity presentation on employment discrimination on Chapter 21 in the Legal Environment of Business textbook, presented by Sandy, Hilda, Jamie, Suri, Robert, and Sebastian. Objectives for this presentation: to understand and learn about Chapter 21 Employment Discrimination and what is Title VII in Civil Rights Act and what federal status are prohibited. We will briefly explain discrimination based on age, disability, and military status. We will discuss what defenses to employment discrimination are available and explain what affirmative action is.
Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. This prohibits job discrimination against employment on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Title VII bans discrimination at any stage of employment, from discriminatory hiring practices, discriminatory treatment in employment, hostile work environment, and retaliation. Title VII also bans discrimination at any stage of employment, from sexual harassment, pregnancy discrimination, and religious accommodations. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act applies to employers with 15 or more employees, labor unions with 15 or more members, and employment agencies, state, local governing units of or agencies, and most of the federal government employment.
Employment discrimination: legitimate non-discriminatory reasons for actions taken by the employer, such as being treated unfair because of certain characteristics. What defenses to employment discrimination are available? There are several defenses to employment discrimination. Some of those are idea, prima facie, and pretext. All of these are helpful because it prohibits discrimination against employees and job applicants.
So what is discrimination based on age, disability, and military status? Let's start with discrimination based on age. It is the most common form of discrimination, since eventually we all get to that stage. The Age Discrimination Employment Act, ADEA, protects employees and any potential employee that is 40 years or older from being discriminated. The Act also prohibits mandatory retirement for non-managerial workers. It prevents people from getting fired based solely on their age. And it also prohibits companies from hiring based on an age bias. Now let's look at a case study of Lilly USA Pharmaceuticals versus Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The senior vice president from Human Resources saw that Lilly's workforce was composed of older workers, so a goal was set to hire more millennials to the workforce. Lilly intentionally decided to underhire older candidates for the sales position in favor of younger candidates. The EEOC saw this and filed suit in the U.S. District Courts. The pharmaceutical will now have to pay $2.4 million to settle the lawsuit and mandatory equal employment opportunity training.
Discrimination based on disability. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits disability-based discrimination in all workplaces with 15 or more workers. Basically, the ADA requires that employers reasonably accommodate the needs of persons with disabilities, unless to do so would cause the employer to suffer an undue hardship. What is a disability? The ADA defines a disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the major life activities of the affected individual. Discrimination based on military status. The Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act prohibits discrimination against persons who have served in the military. The USERRA makes military service and status a protected class and gives members of this class a right to sue an employer for any violations.
Defenses to employment discrimination. In the case of any employment discrimination, the plaintiff must first prove that discrimination actually occurred. Once proven, if able to, the burden then falls onto the employer, as he has to provide justification. One example of defenses to employment discrimination can be a business necessity. The employer must assert that a practice with a discriminatory effect is a necessity, such as any international business that may require their employees to be fluent in 2 languages or more. Another defense can be bona fide occupational qualifications, or BOFQs. These are characteristics that are essential to a job, such as genders or religious beliefs. Race, color, and national origins can never be BOFQs. An example of a BOFQ can be Planned Parenthood, as they only hire female workers or doctors. Seniority systems are another defense against discriminatory acts. This just means that the more years of service you provide, the better off you are. You can be promoted first or even laid off last. The last resort, but definitely not the least, is after acquired evidence. This is simply just evidence that is discovered after any filed lawsuits. This may not always be effective, but most of the times it may limit the amount of damages due.
Affirmative action is a set of policies used to work against discrimination with race, gender, disability, and ethnic origin. This allows minority groups to be included in higher positions when being hired and promoted, as well as acceptance in universities. In 2006, there was a case, Chouette versus Coalition. Chouette was the Attorney General of Michigan. Michigan had banned affirmative action from being used in universities, and because of that, this upset people, specifically minority groups. They sued the state of Michigan, and the case was taken up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court sided with Michigan since their laws did not interfere with the Constitution. Because of this case, we now know that states are allowed to have their own rules with affirmative action as long as it does not interfere with the Constitution. Many people argue that affirmative action is working against discrimination, saying that they are reverse discriminating, which is discriminating against the majority group, like white male.
In conclusion, we talked about Title VII, discrimination based on age, disability, military status. We went over defenses available to employment discrimination and affirmative action. So, if you see it, do something about it.